It was a Tuesday evening when I stumbled upon the truth. The air was thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint sound of the television humming in the background. I had just returned home from a long day at work, ready to unwind and share a moment with my wife, Emily. Our marriage had its ups and downs, but I never imagined we would end up here. That evening, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically, and I would soon discover the dark undercurrents that had been flowing beneath our seemingly calm surface. As I stepped into the living room, I noticed Emily's phone lying face up on the coffee table. A message notification blinked on the screen, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, half expecting to see a message from her sister or a friend. Instead, I was met with the name Jake and a string of flirty messages that made my stomach drop. Each word felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my gut as I read through their exchange. It was clear that Jake was not just a friend. He was the mechanic who had been fixing our car. My heart raced. As the implications sank in, the betrayal hit me like a freight train. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief wash over me. How could she do this? How could she betray the vows we took? I had trusted her, dedicated my life to her, and in return she had chosen a man who spent his days under the hood of cars, twisting wrenches and flirting with my wife. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I felt paralyzed, caught in a web of emotions that left me reeling. After a few moments of standing there, holding her phone like it was a ticking time bomb, I put it back down and stepped out onto the balcony. I needed space to breathe. The evening air was cool against my skin, but I felt nothing but heat coursing through my veins. I could see the city lights twinkling in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled in my heart. I thought about all the moments we had shared, the laughter, the late-night talks, the plans for our future. How could she throw all of that away for a thrill? As I stood there, my thoughts spiraled. I felt like a fool. I had been oblivious to the signs, blind to the cracks forming in our relationship. I thought we were happy, but now I questioned everything. I could hear her moving around inside the house, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside. The thought of confronting her, of seeing the look on her face as I revealed what I knew, made my heart race with both dread and fury. But then a different thought crept in. What if I didn't confront her? What if instead I took control of the situation in a way that would make her feel the weight of her betrayal? The idea simmered in my mind, taking root as I contemplated the meaning of revenge. I wanted her to experience the inconvenience, the disruption that her affair had caused in my life. I wanted her to feel the sting of her choices, to understand that actions have consequences. As I paced back and forth on the balcony, the plan began to formulate. It wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about regaining my sense of power. I would sabotage her car, the very car that had been the backdrop of her secret meetings with Jake. The thought of it sent a rush of adrenaline through me. I could imagine her frustration when she would suddenly find herself stranded, unable to rely on the one thing that had always been there for her. It felt strangely satisfying, like a twisted form of justice. But as I turned to go back inside, I was hit with a wave of doubt. Was this really who I wanted to be? A man driven by revenge. I had always prided myself on being rational, level-headed. But now I felt the grip of jealousy and anger tightening around me, pulling me into a darkness I wasn't sure I could escape. I took a deep breath and stepped back inside, determined to see this through. I would make her feel the consequences of her actions. It was time to take a stand, to reclaim my power in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The days that followed my discovery felt like a blur. I moved through the motions of daily life, but internally I was in chaos. My heart was heavy and my mind was a battlefield. Each time I looked at Emily, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. She was the same woman I had shared my life with, yet she was now a stranger, her laughter echoing hollowly in my ears. I could barely focus on my work, distracted by visions of her with Jake, laughing and sharing intimate moments while I toiled away, oblivious to the reality of our crumbling marriage. I began to notice the little things, the way she would glance at her phone, the subtle smile that crept onto her lips whenever a notification would ping. It was as if she was living in two worlds, one with me and another with him. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting the corners of a life that had become unrecognizable. I couldn't shake the image of her with that mechanic, the man who had stolen her affections, and I knew that I had to act. The idea of sabotaging her car consumed my thoughts. I found myself replaying the plan over and over in my head, how I would disable it just enough to cause frustration, but not enough to cause any danger. I wanted to create a situation that would force her to confront the reality of her choices. I imagined her standing beside the car, her expression shifting from confusion to anger, and finally to realization as she understood the consequences of her affair. Every time I passed by the garage, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. It was a mix of excitement and dread. I was aware of the moral implications of what I was about to do. I knew that sabotaging her car was wrong, that it was a petty act of revenge. But in that moment, the hurt I felt overshadowed any sense of morality. I justified it to myself. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. The opportunity presented itself on a Friday evening. Emily had plans with friends, leaving me alone with the house and the car. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I slipped into the garage, the smell of oil and metal wrapping around me like a shroud. I had never been particularly handy, but I knew just enough to disable the car without raising suspicion. I grabbed a few tools and got to work. As I opened the hood, I felt a mix of exhilaration and guilt. Each movement was deliberate, calculated. I disconnected a few wires, ensuring that the car wouldn't start. It felt almost surreal, like I was playing a part in a twisted drama where I was both the villain and the hero. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself at the irony. Her affair with a mechanic would now lead to a breakdown of her own vehicle. But as I worked, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was this really the way to handle my pain? I kept pushing those thoughts away, focusing instead on the satisfaction of my plan. I was taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. I was tired of feeling powerless, tired of being the one who had been wronged. When I finished, I stepped back and surveyed my work. My heart raced as I imagined the moment she would turn the key in the ignition and nothing would happen. I felt a rush of satisfaction, a flicker of hope that perhaps this would bring her to her senses. Maybe it would make her realize the depth of her betrayal. As I closed the hood and wiped my hands on a rag, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer just a victim of her infidelity. I was taking a stand. I was reclaiming my narrative. But deep down, I also felt a hint of regret creeping in. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. That night, I sat on the couch, waiting for her to return. My heart raced with anticipation. Would she be angry? Would she suspect anything? I couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought of her frustration. But alongside that thrill was a growing sense of unease. I had become someone I never thought I would be, a man driven by vengeance rather than love. As I waited, I reflected on our relationship. I thought about the moments we had shared, the vacations, the late-night talks, the laughter. I had cherished those times, but now they felt like distant memories, overshadowed by the betrayal that loomed over us. I knew I was changing, but I couldn't help but wonder if this change would ultimately define me. When she finally walked through the door, her laughter filled the space, but it sounded different. It felt like a mask hiding the truth that lay beneath. I forced myself to act normal, to play the part of the oblivious husband. I wanted to scream at her, to confront her with the truth, but I held back, letting the moment simmer. The stage was set, and all I could do was wait for the inevitable fallout of my actions to unfold. Would she realize her mistakes? Would this act of sabotage lead to a reckoning? I could only hope that in her frustration, she would see the pain she had caused me. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread mixed with anticipation. I had spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the events of the previous day and the consequences of my actions. I had sabotaged Emily's car, and now I was left to wonder how she would react when she discovered the truth. I felt a mixture of guilt and excitement, knowing that I had crossed a line, but also holding onto the hope that this would lead to some form of clarity in our relationship. I went through the morning routine as if everything was normal. I made coffee and prepared breakfast, all while my mind raced with thoughts of her impending frustration. Part of me wanted to be there when she confronted the issue, to see the realization dawn on her face. But another part of me feared her reaction, the potential for anger and accusations that could spiral into a confrontation I wasn't ready for. Emily came downstairs, her hair tousled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. I greeted her with a smile, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. She looked tired but happy, chattering about her plans for the day. I nodded along, forcing myself to focus on her words rather than the chaos in my mind. I felt like a pretender in my own life, playing a role that was slowly becoming unbearable. As she finished her breakfast, she grabbed her keys and headed for the door. My heart raced as I followed her outside, a silent spectator to the unfolding drama. I watched as she approached the car, her expression shifting from casual confidence to confusion almost instantly. She fumbled with the keys, turning them in the ignition, but the engine remained silent. A wave of satisfaction washed over me, mingled with a pang of guilt. I watched her face as she tried again, her brow furrowing in frustration. She stepped out of the car, peering under the hood, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when she would face the consequences of her choices. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning innocence as I approached her. "Nothing. It won't start," she replied, her voice laced with confusion. "Have you checked the battery?" I suggested, trying to sound helpful while suppressing the smirk threatening to break through. "I don't know," she muttered, clearly flustered. She returned to the driver's seat and tried again, but the car remained unresponsive. I could see the anger bubbling beneath her surface, and it was intoxicating. After several attempts and a few choice words directed at the car, she finally threw her hands up in defeat. "Great, just great," she exclaimed, frustration spilling over. I watched as she paced around the vehicle, her mind racing to figure out what had gone wrong. I felt a sense of power wash over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a creeping sense of guilt. This wasn't who I wanted to be. I didn't want to revel in her misery, but I couldn't help it. She had brought this upon herself. "Do you want me to take a look?" I offered, stepping closer to her. "Why would you know anything about it?" she snapped, her eyes narrowing. I felt a stab of pain at her words, but I brushed it off. "I can give it a shot," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. She rolled her eyes and stepped back, crossing her arms. "Fine, if you think you can fix it." I opened the hood and pretended to examine the engine, my heart racing as I fought to suppress my emotions. Inside, I was a storm of conflicting feelings, anger, resentment, and a strange sense of satisfaction. I knew I had caused this, and yet I found myself hoping that she would finally understand the impact of her actions. After a few moments of silence that felt like an eternity, Emily let out an exasperated sigh. "I can't believe this is happening. I have plans today." This is just typical. I watched her frustration unfold, and I could help but feel a twinge of guilt. Was this truly the way I wanted to handle things? I had wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, but now I was left with the stark realization that this was hurting me too. "Maybe you should call a tow truck," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside me. "Yeah, great idea," she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just what I need, more stress." As she pulled out her phone to call for help, I felt the tension in the air shift. This was not just about the car, it was about the unraveling of our relationship. I had hoped that this act of sabotage would lead to a moment of reckoning, but instead, it felt like I was digging a deeper hole for both of us. While she spoke on the phone, I found myself reflecting on our marriage. I thought about the love we had shared and the dreams we had built together. It felt like a lifetime ago, overshadowed by the betrayal I could no longer ignore. I wanted to confront her, to express my pain and hurt, but the fear of her reaction held me back. When she hung up, she looked at me with a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "I can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice softer now. "I just wanted to have a nice day." I felt a flicker of compassion for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the reality of my own feelings. I had sabotaged her car to make a point, but now, as I watched her disappointment, I wondered if I was really achieving anything at all. "Maybe we can figure something out," I said, trying to bridge the gap between us. Maybe, she replied, her voice distant. As we stood there, the weight of our situation settled heavily around us. I had taken my revenge, but at what cost? I realized I was not just hurting her, I was hurting myself as well. I had opened a door I couldn't close, and now I was left to grapple with the consequences of my actions. The tow truck arrived within the hour, and as the driver assessed the situation, I stood back, watching Emily's frustration morph into embarrassment. She had put on a brave face at first, but now the reality of being stranded without her car was sinking in. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the realization that she had to rely on someone else, a stranger, to resolve her problems. It felt oddly satisfying to witness, yet I couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at me. As the driver worked, Emily paced back and forth, her phone glued to her ear as she called her friends to cancel plans. I could hear the disappointment in her voice, and it twisted my insides. I had wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, but I hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt to watch her suffer. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and I was left questioning whether this act of sabotage was truly worth it. "Are you sure you didn't do something to it?" she asked me pointedly, her eyes narrowing as she caught me watching her. "Why would I do that?" I replied, trying to sound innocent, but the edge in my voice betrayed me. "I don't know anything about cars." She crossed her arms, skepticism etched on her face. "You seem a little too calm about all of this." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "It's just a car, Emily. We can figure it out." But the truth was, it wasn't just about the car. It was about everything that had led us to this moment, the betrayal, the lies, and the emotional distance that had grown between us. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stood there silently, grappling with the mess I had created. When the tow truck driver finally managed to get the car loaded, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. Emily climbed into the passenger seat of the tow truck, her expression a mix of annoyance and resignation. I followed behind in my car, the weight of my actions heavy on my shoulders. The ride to the mechanic's shop was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us, but I didn't know how. The very act of sabotage that I had hoped would bring clarity had only deepened our divide. When we arrived, the mechanic took a look at the car and quickly identified the issues. I felt a surge of anxiety as I watched Emily's face. Would she ask him about the state of the vehicle? Would she suspect foul play? I held my breath, hoping that she wouldn't connect the dots. As the mechanic began explaining the repairs needed, I found myself zoning out, my mind racing with thoughts of what had happened and what was to come. I was a man caught in the web of my own making, and the consequences were beginning to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. Emily listened intently, her brows furrowing as the mechanic described the costs and the time it would take to fix everything. I could see her frustration building, and I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the painful reality of our marriage. "Can you just fix it?" she finally asked, her voice strained. "Of course," the mechanic replied, but I could sense the tension in the air. He looked between us, sensing the discord, but wisely choosing to remain neutral. As we left the shop, I could feel the weight of the silence between us. Emily turned to me, her expression unreadable. "I can't believe this happened. I was really looking forward to today." "Yeah, me too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We drove home in silence, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words. I felt the urge to explain myself, to confess my actions, but fear held me back. What if she reacted violently? What if she didn't care? The thought of her dismissing my pain sent a chill down my spine. When we finally arrived home, I was struck by the reality of our situation. I had sabotaged her car in a moment of anger, but now I was left grappling with the aftermath of my actions. Emily walked inside, her shoulders slumped, and I could see the weight of the day pressing down on her. I followed her inside, my heart racing. "Emily, can we talk?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and desperation. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and sadness. "About what? The car? Or the fact that you've been acting strange ever since I got home?" I felt my heart sink. I want you to know that I didn't mean for things to get this out of hand." "Then why did you do it?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Why would you sabotage my car? What kind of person does that?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words failed me. I had no defense, no justification that would make sense of my actions. I had acted out of hurt and anger, and now I was left standing in the rubble of our marriage, unsure of how to rebuild. "I thought it would make you understand what you've done," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Her expression shifted, a flicker of understanding crossing her features. "You thought that ruining my day would somehow make me feel guilty, or make me see how much I've hurt you." "Yes," I replied, feeling the weight of my own foolishness. "I thought it would make you realize how much pain you've caused me." Instead of the anger I expected, I saw sadness in her eyes. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been feeling guilty about this whole thing?" The revelation hit me hard, and I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crumble. I had wanted her to suffer, but in doing so I had only deepened the chasm between us. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't know how to handle this. I just wanted you to feel something." Emily took a deep breath, her expression softening. "I do feel something, and it's horrible. I've messed up and I've hurt you. But this isn't the way to fix it." As we stood there, the weight of our actions hung in the air between us. I realized that my quest for revenge had only led to more pain, not just for her but for me as well. The path I had chosen was a destructive one, and I was left wondering if there was a way to repair the damage I had done. The air in our living room felt thick with unresolved tension as we stood facing each other, the reality of our situation weighing heavily upon us. I had acted out of anger, and now I was left grappling with the consequences. Emily's expression softened, and I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps we could still salvage what was left of our relationship. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said, my voice trembling as I struggled to find the right words. I felt so betrayed. I didn't know how else to react. I thought if you felt the pain I felt, maybe it would make a difference." Emily crossed her arms, her gaze steady but tinged with sadness. "You think I don't feel guilty about cheating? You think I'm just going to brush this off like it's nothing? I made a terrible mistake and I hate myself for it. But sabotaging my car, that's not going to help anything." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had wanted her to understand my pain, but instead I had pushed her further away. The very act that was supposed to be a wake-up call had only served to deepen the rift between us. "I'm sorry," I repeated, feeling the weight of the apology settle heavily in my chest. "I let my anger get the best of me. I should have talked to you instead of trying to get back at you." Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping as she sank into the couch. "I wish we could go back to before all of this. I wish I could take back what I did, but I can't. And now we're left picking up the pieces." I sat down beside her, the distance between us feeling like a chasm. "I know I messed up. I thought I could control the situation, but I only made things worse. It's not just about you, though," she said, her voice softening. "I need to take responsibility for my actions, too. I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand. But we can't fix this if we're just going to keep hurting each other." Her words resonated with me, and I realized that while I had acted in anger, she, too, was grappling with her own guilt and shame. We were both trapped in this cycle of pain, and the only way out was to confront the truth together. "I don't want to keep hurting you," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to understand why this happened. I want to work through it, but I don't know how." Emily looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know either. I made a terrible choice and I don't want to lose you, but I also need to understand why I did it. I think we both need to be honest with ourselves if we want to move forward." As we sat together in silence, I felt the heaviness of my actions begin to lift, if only slightly. The road ahead would be difficult, but perhaps we could find a way to navigate it together. I reached for her hand, and after a moment of hesitation she took it, a tentative bridge forming between us. "I want to try," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "I want us to be better, to communicate and be honest. I don't want this to be the end." Emily nodded, her expression softening. "I want that too, but it's going to take time. We need to rebuild trust, and that's not going to happen overnight." "I understand," I replied, feeling A sense of relief washed over me. I'm willing to put in the effort, I just need you to be honest with me from now on. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady. I promise I will, no more secrets. I don't want to live like that anymore. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. We had both made mistakes, but we were willing to confront them together. It wouldn't be easy, but I believed we could find a way back to each other. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and moments of vulnerability. We talked late into the night, sharing our fears and insecurities. I learned about the pressures Emily had felt, the reasons behind her choices, and she listened as I opened up about my own feelings of betrayal and inadequacy. We sought counseling, and as we navigated the rocky terrain of our relationship, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. The laughter slowly returned, and while the shadows of the past still lingered, I felt a renewed sense of connection blossoming between us. But there were still moments of doubt. I would catch myself wondering if I could truly forgive her, if I could ever trust her again. And there were times when Emily would withdraw, lost in her own thoughts and guilt. The road to healing was not linear, and we often found ourselves taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I felt the weight of our journey pressing down on us. "Do you think we'll ever be able to move past this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily looked at me, her expression contemplative. "I think we can, but it's going to take work. We have to be patient with each other and with ourselves." "I want that," I said, feeling a sense of determination welling up inside me. "I want to believe we can come out stronger on the other side." "Me too," she replied, a small smile breaking through the tension. "But we need to keep communicating, keep being honest. No more secrets, right?" "Right," I agreed, feeling a sense of relief. "We'll take it one day at a time." As we sat together, I realized that while the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, they could serve as reminders of our resilience. We had faced the darkness together, and now we were choosing to walk toward the light. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I continued to navigate the complexities of our relationship. The path to healing was fraught with challenges, but we were committed to facing them together. Our conversations became deeper, more meaningful, and I found myself rediscovering the woman I had fallen in love with. The laughter returned, and slowly, the shadows of betrayal began to lift. I often reflected on that fateful day when I had sabotaged her car. It felt like a lifetime ago, a moment when my pain had clouded my judgment and pushed me to act out in ways I could never have imagined. I was haunted by the memory of her frustration and confusion, and it served as a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. While I had hoped my revenge would lead to a reckoning, it had only deepened the wounds we both carried. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, I turned to Emily, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. "I'm really glad we've been able to work through this," I said, my voice sincere. "I didn't think we'd make it, to be honest." Emily smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "Me too. It's been tough, but I feel like we've grown so much. I never want to go back to that place of hurt and secrecy." "Neither do I replied, feeling a pang of vulnerability. "I've learned a lot about myself through all of this. I realized how important communication is, and how easily things can spiral out of control when we don't talk." "Exactly," she agreed, her expression earnest. "I've learned that I need to be honest about my feelings too. I don't want to carry that burden anymore." As we continued to talk, I felt a sense of hope blooming within me. The darkness that had once threatened to consume us was gradually being replaced by a light that we were both nurturing together. We had faced the storm and emerged on the other side, battered but stronger. One day, while we were out running errands, I noticed a small mechanic shop on the corner of a street we frequented. A wave of memories washed over me, and I felt a twinge of discomfort. It was a reminder of the affair and the pain that had once been so fresh. But as I glanced at Emily, I realized that I didn't feel the same anger I once had. Instead, I felt a sense of closure. "Hey, do you remember that mechanic, Jake?" I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. Emily nodded, her expression shifting slightly. "Yeah, I do. That was a rough time for us." "It was," I replied, my voice steady. "But I think I've finally let go of that anger. I don't want to hold on to it anymore." She looked at me, surprise flickering in her eyes. Really, that's a big step. I know it won't be easy, I continued, but I want to focus on rebuilding what we have. I don't want to let the past dictate our future. Emily reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. I want that too. I want us to move forward, not backward. As we walked past the mechanic shop, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The memories would always be there, but they no longer held power over me. I was choosing to focus on the love we were rebuilding, the trust we were slowly restoring. One evening, we decided to revisit some of our favorite places, retracing the steps of our early relationship. We laughed over dinner at our favorite restaurant, reminiscing about the good times we had shared. It was a night filled with warmth and connection, a testament to our resilience. "Do you remember our first date?" I asked, a smile creeping onto my face. "Of course, you were so nervous," Emily replied, chuckling. "You spilled your drink all over the table." "I did," I laughed, the memory flooding back. "I thought for sure you'd never want to see me again." "But I did," she said softly, her eyes locking onto mine. "And I'm so glad I did." As we continued to share stories and laughter, I realized that we were not just surviving, we were thriving. We were learning to communicate openly, to express our needs and desires, and to confront our fears head-on. One night, as we lay in bed, I turned to Emily, feeling a surge of emotion. "I love you," I said, my voice filled with sincerity. "I know we've been through a lot, but I believe in us." "I love you too," she replied, her voice soft and warm. "I'm grateful for you every day. I want to keep building our future together." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had both made mistakes, but we were choosing to learn from them. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but I felt confident that we could face them together. As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on our journey, the betrayal, the sabotage, the pain, and ultimately the healing. I realized that love was not just about the good times. It was about facing the storms together and emerging stronger on the other side. We were no longer defined by our past. We were writing a new story, one filled with hope, resilience, and love. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.